The worm has returned. Helwani is back to his old tricks yet again, so I'm going to have to make another video on this topic because he just can't seem to learn from his mistakes, and it almost feels like he's intentionally spinning this whole narrative on the Israel Adesanya versus Dricus Du Plessis fight. Maybe I'm just being crazy though. Maybe he's just consistently making mistakes over and over again. When is he going to learn? We're about to watch this video of an interview between Adesanya and Helwani, and I'm going to talk about some moments in the interview where they talk about Dricus Du Plessis. This is absolutely crazy. Stay tuned in this video. Let's start straight away here. 20 seconds into this clip of Israel Adesanya talking about Dricus Du Plessis. Let's start straight away.
I want new
So
hands.
could we talk about the DDP thing for a moment?
Yeah.
Itching. He's itching to get into the Dricus Du Plessis situation. Let's listen. He wants to get into this for a moment. What's he got to say?
Okay, so, because I got some shit for this.
What?
By me, of course. So he's seen it. He's felt the backlash. I wonder what he's going to say now that he's seen the backlash. He's seen that he is wrong. He's seen that he is lying if he's not incorrect and wrong. So let's see what Ariel has to say about this.
I think that fight makes a lot of sense. And there's a story there.
Yeah.
What's the story, Ariel? Let's hear about the story.
I personally, this is me, I didn't love some of the things that were being said by him and his team.
He didn't like some of the stuff that was said by Dricus and his team. The fact that Dricus is going to be the first fighter fighting out of Africa to get a belt in the UFC. That was his plan. Ariel doesn't like that. He also doesn't like some of the things that Dricus Du Plessis' team has said. So tell us what they've said, Ariel, in context.
And so I had,
What did they say?
you know, we'll find out who the real African is and all that stuff.
Dricus never said that. He never said the words real African. We'll find out who the real African is. His coach said that. But, Ariel, one thing that you consistently fail to mention is that the coach said that because Usman said this about Dricus Du Plessis.
And so just because you went over to South Africa and you're raised there, that doesn't make you African.
That doesn't make you African. So the reason why Dricus Du Plessis' coach said the real African, we'll show you who the real African is because he was responding to the comments made by Usman saying that he wasn't the real African. And he was sort of taking aim at that side of the argument that's going on right now because there's clearly some sides to this argument. It's basically Dricus Du Plessis versus Adesanya and Usman in this whole argument that's going on right now. But Ariel never mentions that. He acts like the coach of Dricus Du Plessis came out and said, out of nowhere, we'll show you who the real African is. Usman literally said on interview, in response to Du Plessis saying he wants to be the first fighter fighting out of Africa to be a world champion, that Dricus Du Plessis, that doesn't make you African. He literally said that Dricus is not African because his family came over to South Africa. That doesn't make you African. So it was in response to being called not African. That's why his coach came out after the Usman interview and said, we'll show you guys who the real African is. But Ariel never mentions that, and he acts like Dricus Du Plessis said this from the get-go to try and rile up Adesanya and Usman. His first statement wasn't to rile them up. It might have been a little bit, but there was nothing wrong in him doing that. People have done that so much. Edwards said it in the build-up to his title fight about Bisping. We've had other fighters do it as well. We made a big deal about Brandon Moreno being the first Mexican-born and raised fighting out of Mexico world champion when Cain Velasquez has done it before, but he didn't do it out of Mexico. This has been made a deal throughout the entire history of the sport, but it's only a problem when Dricus says it. That's very disingenuous to me. But we're going to move on because there's a lot more I want to break down.
Okay, I'll say this again.
Here's what Adesanya has to say. And remember, Ariel has a real problem with what Dricus had to say. His little amount, I'm going to be the first African fighter fighting out of Africa in the UFC. I breathe African air every day. Me and Cameron, we're going to be the African champions in the UFC. He has a problem with that.
I never questioned his ethnicity. I never said he's not African. Even though colonization, we don't want to go over there and all that stuff.
Yeah,
he is an African because he was born in South Africa.
Of course. So why did Usman say that he wasn't? Why are they not acknowledging that? Of course he is, says Ariel. Of course he's African. So why have you not mentioned anything about Usman saying that he's not? Because his family came over to South Africa before, and he was raised in Africa, even though Dricus is born and raised in Africa, and so is his family. Like, of course she's African, says Ariel. So why didn't you have any problem with what Usman said? Clearly Dricus is going to take offense to that. Clearly Dricus' coach is going to take offense to that. But Ariel has nothing to say about what Usman said. Just problems with what Dricus said, defending himself, basically.
And I never questioned that. But the fact that he was being a dickhead and, oh, we do be who the real African is, you know.
He never said real. I literally can't say this enough. Have I actually got Dricus' part of this? I think I do. What did he really say?
Africa. Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa?
Let me know when he says real African, because every time anyone mentions anything Dricus said about this situation, they always say real African. I'm the real African. Let's hear where he says real African in this.
As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand.
True, they went back to America and New Zealand. They didn't go back to Africa.
I'm going to take a belt to Africa.
I'm going to take a belt to Africa.
I'm the African fighter in the UFC.
I'm the African fighter in the UFC. The fighter fighting out of Africa. The one that's going to have an African country on his shorts. You know what I'm saying?
Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised.
All true so far.
We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be. Where did he say real African champ? Like everyone always says whenever they talk about what Dricus said.
That he was being a dickhead and, oh, we do be who the real African is.
Never said that on the microphone. Never said that. Literally never said it, but that's what people always say he said, so they can take offense to it, because they can't take offense to his actual statement because it's absolutely facts. And they know that, so they have to twist what he said so they can have a problem with it because their feelings got hurt because he spoke the truth. We move on, though. There's more to this.
You know, I breathe African air, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, how the fuck are you going to question me, Francis, and Kamaru's?
I like how he chucks Francis in there, even though Francis hasn't taken offense to this whatsoever, because I'm telling you right now, the reason Usman and Adesanya took offense is because they kind of feel like he's right. And they don't kind of feel as African as maybe they'd want to feel. And that's a problem when they move away from a place early in life. There's like a lack of sense of belonging. And there's a reason why Ngannou has never really mentioned that. Because Ngannou, I bet you in Ngannou's mind, he's like, I ain't going to mention this. I ain't going to give a big heated response to Dricus Du Plessis. He can't be talking about me. I know who I am. Seems like Usman and Adesanya don't. But he keeps chucking Ngannou in. Like, Ngannou ain't a part of this, dude. It's kind of you and Usman versus him at the moment.
Blackness, our Africanness. Like, what if this is, and Kamaru's blackness.
We questioned your blackness. I don't think Dricus is colorblind, mate. I don't think Dricus ever said you aren't black. So he's not questioning your blackness. It's crazy to me. There's so much more I want to say about these topics and get into in the way the world works, but I don't want to get too into it. I want to tackle it at a surface level. I know there's something beneath this to Adesanya and a lot of people in the world nowadays. But, you know, whatever. Let's just tackle it at a surface level.
Africanness. Like, what the fuck are you? So I had to put...
You know what I mean? It's so weird. Like, he never, challenged his Africanness or anything along those lines. But that's apparently what he's done. He never challenged their blackness. Like, it's such a weird thing. He's going to be the guy fighting out of Africa. You guys never went back to Africa. You did for a parade to show the belts off and get all the adoration and do all the parades and the festivals. And then you went back to New Zealand and America and lived there with all your money and your belt. Dricus wants to take it back to Africa where he lives and trains. You know what I mean? But either way, we move on to another moment.
Yeah,
You ever heard of Ancestry in Me?
of course.
If you do Ancestry in Me on me, I know where the fuck I'm from. If you do it on him, he'll find out where the fuck he's from.
And I'll tell you this now. According to science, if you go back far enough in Dricus' ancestry, looks like he's African as well, dude. So it's very weird to me here. And this is the argument because listen, I know Dricus is not as African as Israel Adesanya and that. I'm just calling out the hypocrisy Like, if you're going to keep that energy with Dricus, keep it all the way. If you want to start talking about ethnicity and he's not this, and, you know, I know who I am, let's look back in your history and see who you really are. So basically, at this point, Adesanya's saying he's not African, because if you look back in his ancestry, you'll see who he is. But if you look back a certain amount, it'll go back to Africa according to science. So if you want to play that game, let's play it all the way. You know what I mean? You want to play that? Let's play it all the way. You want to talk about ancestry? You can't set a point and be like, well, this is when it was this. You know what I mean? That's like Americans. It's a very condensed version of it, but it's a very similar version of it. That's like white European Americans after the natives were basically gone to such a small level, saying from this point onwards, this is what makes an American. And if they did do that, which some of them do, they would be called out for that. You know what I mean? You can't wait till all the ones you don't, I'm not going to get into it. You can't wait for certain things to move away and then say, oh, okay, from now, this point onwards, this is what makes an African. If we all go back to Africa in our ancestry, then this ethnicity argument doesn't matter. It makes you seem like you're just basing it all on race, Adesanya. I don't think you're doing that, are you? I don't think that's what you're doing. That would be racist, technically. But we move on.
And I'll tell you, it wouldn't say South Africa. I'll tell you that. It wouldn't say South Africa if you do ancestry and me or whatever thing, because they'll tell you where the fuck he's from. He'll know his real heritage. I know who the fuck I am, and I stand on that. No matter where in the world I am, you can take the boy out of Africa, but you can never take Africa out of the man.
Unless you're in China, in which case you'll say that you're not African, you're Chinese. And unless you're in New Zealand, in which case you'll say you're a Kiwi, even though you're not. Like, imagine if after Adesanya gave his acceptance speech for sporting in New Zealand, someone in the crowd went, let's look back in your history, after he called himself a Kiwi on stage. Imagine if he was getting called out for that. No, couldn't be that way round. Let's listen to more.
So I know that, and I never questioned him as an African. So who the fuck is he to question me as an African? I'm going to manifest him winning this.
Who is he to question you as an African? He's going to be the African fighter fighting that. You're not. You don't live in Africa. I don't understand how more. I've done these videos so much. I don't understand how much more I can package it. Like, what different way I can package this delivery message. You don't live in Africa, dude. Like, that's just a simple thing. You live and train and sleep in New Zealand, dude. And that's where you're going back to after this interview. It's just a thing. Usman lives and trains in America. That's where he's going back to, or that's where he is now. If he does it, well, he would do an interview in America, so he'd stay there. But you know what I mean? I don't know how many different ways I can package that message. He meant, but you know, all good. And he came out and he explained his stance. So from that point onwards, Ariel and Adesanya should be like, oh, he explained it. Makes complete sense. But no, they're just being ignorant so they can hate on him for something that he literally hasn't said. We move on to another moment.
In September.
Which is going to be at 2 minutes and 10 seconds. It gets crazier. Listen to this.
There's a different type of energy that comes out of you when you talk about him. I saw the video.
Yeah, I just felt it now.
Yeah, well, I saw the video with your brother, and, you know.
Now, remember, Ariel Helwani has a problem with what Dricus has been saying. By saying that he's going to be the African fighting in the UFC, out of Africa, breathing African air. And that's what that's an African champion, and that's who I'll be. He has a problem with Dricus saying that, by the way. I wonder if he has a problem with Israel Adesanya racially using a racial slur against Dricus Du Plessis. I wonder if Ariel does.
Yeah.
You were calling him some names too, and then people.
Some names, Ariel? Some names? A racial slur? You were calling him some names, you know, like. But you have a big problem with what Dricus said. Isn't this interesting? The worm has returned, boys. The worm has returned in full force. Let's play that one more time, Ariel. What was he calling him?
Just felt it now.
Yeah.
A racial slur, by the way?
Well, I saw the video with your brother, and, you know, you were calling him some names too.
You were calling him some names too, but, you know, I had a problem with what he said, but, you know, you were calling him some names. Like what? Tell us, Adesanya.
And then people are like, yeah, which.
And what?
Listen, I'm not going to get into all of that.
Nah, but it's funny.
And what? Oh, who cares? You know, I have a problem with what Dricus said, but your racial slur can go by. Like, it's such a pathetic, wormy stance to have. it's just so sad that people can't see the hypocrisy in this. You know what I mean? It really is weird to me that people just don't kind of get that is strange. You know what I mean? To allow one thing and be angry at Dricus saying that he's fighting out of Africa and then just give a complete pass to a racial slur. Now, it's not the same level of slur as others. You know what I mean? I get that. And there's so many reasons for that. And I don't find I don't find offense to it the way Adesanya would to the word that would be aimed at him. That's just the reality of it. It doesn't have the same historical weight to the word. But the intent of the word is to insult someone based on race. And if you want a society where that's not going to be accepted, it can't be accepted all the way. Simple as that. That's just how it is. And then just in a common thing here with Ariel and Israel Adesanya, Ariel's just like laughing off. Oh, like, you know, that racial slur you said. You called him a couple names. But let's move on. I'm still cool with you, dude. You know what I mean? Just a little fucking wormy little he shows himself so many times. And then all he has to do is slam dunk some absolute downy moron, Paddy Pimlet. And all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my God, Ariel's such a G, such a boss. He keeps it real. How many more videos do I have to make exposing this worm? Doesn't address any of them. Think about that right now, everyone watching this video. If you're still into this video, if you're still watching 16 minutes in right now, how many times has one person said one comment about Ariel and he forms a massive documentary, like he just forms a massive argument, 30-minute breakdown of everything they've said and destroys everything. My videos get like 90k views, 80,000 views on this topic. I got an 100,000 view video on an Ariel Helwani topic, calling him out and exposing him. Not a fucking peep, because he can't win this argument. If he could absolutely destroy me and win an argument and destroy my channel, he would. He would easily do that. Take a 10-minute segment, say everything I'm saying is wrong. He would do it. But he can't, because he knows he's being a hypocrite. And he knows he's just pandering to Adesanya. And trying to twist a narrative on Dricus Du Plessis to rile up the beef so he could have these interviews and talk about the beef that shouldn't even like have the connotation that he brings to it. It should be a competitive beef. But he brought this whole shade to it, you know what I mean? And that's no pun intended there. He brought a shade to this beef and made it a beef between shades, if you know what I'm saying. We move on to something else here. After Ariel's laughing at that word being used and like, no big deal, you know, but I have a big problem with what Dricus said about living and training in Africa and thinking he's African. You know what I mean? It's so dumb. There's a spider
two,
on
and then
my
people
leg.
are like,
Cracker.
yeah, which
And what?
listen, I'm not going to get into all of that.
And what? I'm not going to get into all of that. What a spineless little worm.
It's funny. I don't care.
It's funny. I don't care. What do you think about that, Ariel? Racial slur. Funny. I don't care. And I don't care. I really don't care. I don't. But let's see how Ariel, who has a big problem with what Dricus had to say, feels about a racial slur. Because Adesanya doesn't care. What does Ariel think?
But
I'll call him a nigga too. He's a bitch.
So my thing was,
so funny. You're so charismatic, Israel Adesanya. It's so crazy. I wish Israel Adesanya could just stop this bullshit and just be an interesting and entertaining fighter.
why didn't they just book that fight? It's right there.
Talk to Dana. You got his number.
Why didn't they just book that fight? It's right there. I don't know why I'm including this bit. I feel like I wasn't supposed to, but we'll listen.
Let me just DM him real quick. I don't know. He hasn't responded in like 7 years.
Really?
Okay. We go to 3 minutes and 3 seconds.
I'm gonna make it happen, regardless. And
It's about making the Dricus fight happen regardless. Willing it into existence is what Adesanya's talking about.
funny enough, we've trained together before.
You sparred.
This is interesting. They've trained together before. We haven't heard this. But he said it before on an interview. He said Dricus got the better of the grappling and he got the better of the striking by far in both directions.
Yeah.
How'd it go?
Yeah, I whooped his ass. He just wrestle fucked me in the first round. And
How long ago?
Years ago. I was
He wrestle effed me in the first round. I whooped his ass. It's probably how most people would expect that sparring to go back back in the day, if they did train ages ago, Adesanya wasn't fully developed in his grappling game, so Dricus would win the grappling, and then Adesanya would win in the stand-up because he was a purist, great kickboxer, and Dricus is Dricus Du Plessis and fights like a drunk man.
I was in China. I went to Thailand for like a little...
Oh, yeah, remember when you went to China and called yourself Chinese? 327. Let's move on to another moment.
Cool kid. So...
It's what he thinks about Dricus.
Yeah, even in the UFC, when he came to the UFC, I was actually supportive. I was like, oh, another African in the UFC. Yes, I swear you can find this online on my YouTube, I'm sure. I was like, oh, another African in the UFC. This is cool. So the fact that he came out on the thing and started to like be braggadocious and question me, I was like, who the fuck is this cunt?
The problem I have with that is, I'm not even going to look to see if Adesanya did show him support coming into the UFC as another African in the UFC. Cool, I'm going to take his word for it. I believe you. You did say that on somewhere on YouTube. I can't find it. But I believe you. You said that at some point. I don't think he would claim to have said that if he didn't. I'm sure he did say Africa stand up with something kind of Africa related whenever Dricus won a debut or something like that. But the problem is, the way he explains... Listen to it back.
But yes, I swear you can find this online on my YouTube, I'm sure. I was like, oh, another African in the UFC. This is cool. So the fact that he came out on the thing and started to like be braggadocious and question me, I was like, who the fuck is this cunt?
Like, he only snapped once there wasn't beef between them and he found no offense to anything Dricus has said. He fully accepted him as an African fighter in the UFC. But now that he's taken some offense to what Dricus said, all of a sudden, let's look back in your ancestry and see where you're really from. You know what I mean? It's like how Dricus is towards him is a change on the fact of if Dricus is African or not. You know what I'm saying? So something is an objective truth in the world that Dricus Du Plessis is technically African. And when he was nice to Izzy and there was no beef, that's true to Izzy. That objective truth is true. But when Dricus says something that Izzy doesn't really see too kindly to, and then Usman slams him back and calls him not African, and then Dricus responds, all of a sudden, let's look back in your ancestry and find out where your heritage really lies and who you really are. You know what I mean? And all this, and then calls him a slur, and all of a sudden it changes that objective truth that he himself believed in when Dricus was cool with him. Now it changes that. That's hypocritical. We move on to another moment at 3:49. Right here.
It's personal.
It's personal. It definitely is. He racially abused him, in a way. True. He literally used a racial slur on him. Is it personal, do you think, says Ariel? I wonder.
Yeah, not really like personal, like...
It feels personal when you talk about him like this.
Yeah, no, it's more about history. It's more about my people. It's more about who the fuck do you think you are? Have you done your research on how the fuck you got to Africa?
And then we get into like straight up eugenics. It's just crazy. It's crazy. Listen to this again now.
Personal, like...
It feels personal when you talk about him like this.
Yeah, no, it's more about history.
So it's not really personal. It's, he like questioned if it's personal.
Not really like personal, like...
not really if personal, So if this isn't personal, what is the real Adesanya? You know what I mean? If racial slurs aren't personal for Israel Adesanya here, and that's where we're getting to. This is like the first time in like recent combat history that someone has legitimately used a racial slur on someone in the build-up for a fight. This don't happen. This is like a once in however long situation that this is happening. And this isn't even personal for Adesanya. Imagine what he'd be saying if he truly felt like it was personal. I can only imagine how he would be dissecting all of the different genetic things of Dricus Du Plessis and his people. Like, he would really be going in, apparently, if this isn't personal. But listen to more of this.
It feels personal when you talk about him like this.
Yeah, no, it's more about history. It's
more about history.
More about my people. It's more about who the fuck do you think you are? Have you done your research on how the fuck you got to Africa?
It's more about my people. It's about who the fuck you are. Have you done your research on how you got to Africa? First of all, there's no evidence to suggest that the reason why Dricus got there. There is evidence to suggest, but there's not evidence to suggest that he personally did when a bunch of people like him did something. So that's a bit of a generalization. Like, Dricus could have came, a bit later after the initial boom. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, he doesn't control what happened in his history. So how should he be held accountable for that? By the same energy, let's just say Israel Adesanya grew up kind of rich with some generational wealth in his family. By Adesanya's logic, we should look into history and find out how, under occupation of other countries, Nigerians got rich. I wonder how. That would be unfair, though, Adesanya, for me to paint you by that brush of some others that are in your description in that area. You know what I mean? But you can do that to Dricus Du Plessis. Paint him with the same brush. The worst possible situation that Dricus' ancestors could have done, that's the brush you're painting him with right now. The worst possible situation for you is the very worrying truth and the uncomfortable truth of how certain Africans like Israel Adesanya in Nigeria got rich in an occupied country. How did he get generational wealth? I wouldn't question that. I wouldn't paint him by that brush. I would assume that it was all good and he just got it the hard way. You know what I mean? Like, let's not get into that, Adesanya, because you don't want to get into that conversation with your rich background. You know what I mean? Let's not be a hypocrite for a bit. Listen to a bit more.
Do you know who the fuck you are? I don't think he knows who the fuck he is, but I'll remind him who the fuck he is.
So are you?
I don't know how that's supposed to happen. But either way, it's just a weird situation for me. And if I want to sum this up, I'm not saying everyone like Adesanya is like this, because then I would be just as bad as Adesanya. But a few people like Adesanya, I'm on eggshells right now, boys. I'm on eggshells. A few people similar to Adesanya have this underlying hatred of people like Dricus Du Plessis, let's just say. And that hatred is bred into them from a young age, pretty much. And it's something they secretly carry. And you don't notice it until there's an excuse for them to show it. And I'm not saying that everyone like Adesanya is like this. I'm just saying a few people like Adesanya are like this to people like Dricus Du Plessis, where there is this underlying hatred that is being contained until an excuse comes up to absolutely unleash it on somebody. And that's what this Dricus Du Plessis interview is, in my opinion. It has really brought out an underlying hatred from Israel Adesanya to Dricus Du Plessis, and maybe not just Dricus Du Plessis, maybe people that are like Dricus Du Plessis, if you will. That's what I feel like has happened in this whole situation with Adesanya and Dricus Du Plessis. Du Plessis has said something that, if misconstrued enough and pushed into a narrative that suits you enough, you could use as an excuse to unleash a certain type of hatred on someone for the way they look. And that's what sort of happened here with Adesanya. And I'm not going to say that this is in any way typical of Ariel or anything along those lines, but it's just weird that we have this same thing again, and Ariel is the person on the sidelines stoking the beef for his own personal gain. It's a very weird world we're in. Let's just say. Things just all seem to figure themselves out, if you will. See you later, guys. Thank you for watching. Thought I'd make this video. I had to, man. Someone's got to be saying this side of the argument, because it's just getting crazy. And eventually it's going to get real crazy if they do end up fighting each other. And we got to just strap in for them. You know what I mean? See you later. Goodbye.